Hello and welcome to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast number 70. As promised, this week we're starting a series looking at some of the most controversial questions Doctor Who has ever raised. Things like, what is Doctor Who canon? Could the Doctor ever become a woman? And the unit dating controversy. Today though, we're asking the question, how do you define a Doctor Who companion? Before we really get underway here, I want to say from the outset that I'm in no way planning to offer a definitive answer to this or any of the other questions we'll be looking at in this series. The object of the exercise is to explore as many different views as possible relating to the question in hand. As those of you who follow the Facebook page will be aware, I've been gathering your thoughts throughout the week, and this show is the culmination of those thoughts. I'll interject with my own views from time to time as we go along, but at the end of the day, I'm not even sure there is a definitive answer. Interestingly, when I first posted a question about this subject on the Facebook page, I worded it like this: what makes a Doctor Who companion? That led to some great responses from people such as Christine Weslin, and she said, very good question. Off the top of my head, I think the ability to think quickly and not to follow the Doctor blindly. Trust him, but trust your instincts, and fight for what you believe in, such as Donna in Pompeii. The companions are there to balance the Doctor in my belief, to keep him from becoming too godlike. I love that the 10th Doctor is so completely fascinated by the human race, both the good and the bad side, and I feel like this is the reason the Doctor always has companions, not just because he's lonely, but to help to balance him. So, think quickly, act quickly, trust but not blindly, question things that seem too straightforward, and always, always be ready to run. The first word that came to mind was balance, then compassion, then strength. A good companion must have all of those. Thanks for that, Christine, and in all of those thoughts I think you're absolutely right. Melissa Haynes said, I think a good Doctor Who companion is a quick thinker, reliable and trustworthy to carry out the tasks that the Doctor gives them. Not a doormat, and able to stand up to the Doctor when needs be without coming off all screamy. I'm talking about you, Donna. And compassionate and curious about things. Interesting to have the other side of the trust coin played there, Melissa. It's not just about trusting the Doctor, it's about being trustworthy as his companions as well. Thanks for that. Paul M. Blackhurst said, it's a good question. I could just say an eye candy, but that would be so unfair. In my opinion, the companion that all the others should be compared to is Sarah Jane Smith. She had guts, brains and beauty all rolled into one, and she never really left the Doctor's life. But as the great Mr. Terence Dicks once said, the companion is us. Again, a great answer, Paul, thank you. Interesting that you bring out the whole companion is us thing. I wonder how many answers might have been different if they were given with that in mind. Not that the other answers we've had were wrong in any way, but we're all guilty of seeing the companions on the TV show and drawing our answers simply from that, rather than taking the view that Paul quotes from Terence Dicks, that the companion is us. Thank you for all those comments. It's been fascinating to hear what in your view makes a companion. But as I'm sure you realise, that wasn't quite the question I was looking for answers to. What I meant to put was more along the lines of, how do you define a Doctor Who companion? So with that in mind, I posted this deliberately thought-provoking statement and asked for your views. This house believes that to be a Doctor Who companion, you have to have travelled in the TARDIS. In a moment we'll look at your responses to that statement, but before that, let me quote you this from Wikipedia page Doctor Who (companion). Although the term companion is designated to specific characters by the show's producers and appears in the BBC's promotional material and off-screen fictional terminology, there is no formal definition that constitutes such a designation. Stephen Brooke in the Guardian newspaper's Organ Grinder blog discounted Michelle Ryan as a likely next companion, but said that what constitutes a Doctor Who companion is no longer clear. The definition of who is and is not a companion becomes less clear in the newer series. During the Doctor's 3 latest incarnations, his primary companions such as Rose Tyler and Martha Jones have fulfilled a distinct dramatic role, more significant than other less prominent TARDIS travellers such as Adam, Jack and Mickey. The British press referred to Martha as the first ethnic minority companion in the then 43-year-old television history of Doctor Who, and the first black assistant, despite the presence of Mickey Smith in the previous season, including several episodes in which he travelled in the TARDIS with the Doctor. The opening credits do little to clarify the situation. In the first 2 series of the renewed programme, the only supporting actor to receive a title credit is Billie Piper. In subsequent series, Freema Agyeman and Catherine Tate are credited in all episodes in which they appear. In the 3rd series, John Barrowman receives a credit for his return to the show. Series 4 gave Agyeman, Piper, Barrowman and Elizabeth Sladen title billing for each of their appearances. Noel Clarke reprised his role in the Series 4 finale. Although listed as a companion alongside the other actors on the BBC Doctor Who website, Clarke is not credited in the same way. In The End of Time, John Sim receives title billing for his antagonist role as the Master, ahead of Bernard Cribbins as companion Wilfred Mott. Companions in the new series also have a more flexible tenure than their classical predecessors. Several companion characters have returned to the series after leaving the Doctor's company, most notably in the Series 4 finale The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, which features the return of Rose, Martha, Jack, Sarah Jane and Mickey. This tendency, plus the increase in one-off companions like Astrid Peth and Jackson Lake, has further obscured the matter of who is and is not a companion, and when. Interesting thoughts in themselves that throw up further questions. If you have any views on that article, don't forget you can leave your feedback on Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast on Facebook, or you can email your feedback to respectthething@hotmail.com. So, kicking us off with your views on the subject is Michael Doyle. "It's a good question," said he. "I assume there must be more to it than just travelling in the TARDIS. Otherwise some minor characters would be considered companions, such as H.G. Wells and Van Gogh. On the flip side, some, like the Brig, only travelled in the TARDIS long after most people would already have considered him a companion. Then you have Liz Shaw. I don't remember if she ever travelled in the TARDIS, and Captain Yates definitely never did. And since I've never seen the story because it doesn't exist, Sarah Kingdom in the Dalek Master Plan is considered a companion according to the old guidebooks I have, and she technically only lasted 1 story. Mind you, it was a 12-week story. Plus all of the great guest stars in Tennant's final season of specials then couldn't be considered companions, and that's kind of a shame. I guess to me a companion is more important to the Doctor than a mere person he meets. Someone who makes an impact on him and makes him care more about them." Thanks for that, Michael. I love that you've brought out what the Doctor sees as a companion as well. Again, I think too often we look at it from our own point of view, and as a result we miss one of the fundamentals of the issue, what the Doctor thinks. Charlotte Brown said, "The definition of companion is someone who accompanies or spends time with another, and synonyms for it are friend or buddy. So surely anyone that spends time with the Doctor and becomes his friend is a companion. If it were just defined by who travels in the TARDIS, then there would be people that the Doctor doesn't like. For example, Adam, that Rose brings on board early on. I wouldn't class him as a companion, but he flew on the TARDIS." Thanks for that, Charlotte. Again, interesting to see something of a flip side in relation to those who've travelled in the TARDIS being companions. Very clearly the Doctor didn't like Adam, and the same could be said of Jackie Tyler as well.
My mother's cooking.
Good, put her on a slow heat and let her simmer.
Yet they both travelled in the TARDIS. Continuing your thoughts is Douglas J. Harkins, who said, I think one who has simply accompanied him on an adventure is a new friend and ally. A companion is someone who puts aside much of their own life to accompany the Doctor on his adventures through space and time. A friend or ally might help in an adventure, but when it's over they go on with their lives. A companion would, after world-threatening adventures in which they face great dangers and horrific aspects of death, ask the Doctor, where next? Thanks for that, Douglas. A great exploration of the length of time it takes to become a companion. But on that basis, would we also consider Sergeant Benton a companion? Benton, like the rest of the unit family, popped in and out of the Doctor's life, but many fans out there consider them all to be companions. Andrew Marmot said, there is no discussion, and for once I'm not going straight to Pedant's Corner. I agree with the House. No travelling in the TARDIS, and I mean where it goes somewhere, not just going inside and walking out again like Jackson Lake. No companion status. Strong view, Andrew, and one I know you're not alone in too. But where does that leave the Brigadier? To the best of my knowledge, he never travelled in the TARDIS, at least not on screen. We know he does in BBC radio adventure The Paradise of Death, but are the audios canon? Well, that's a discussion for later in this series. Of course, he was in it when the TARDIS was in Unit HQ and the whole of Unit HQ was transported to the antimatter universe, but in that case, technically the TARDIS didn't go anywhere. So do we discount the Brigadier as a companion? In response to that same statement, this house believes that to be a Doctor Who companion you have to have travelled in the TARDIS. Bungo Hoover, gotta love that name Bungo, said simply, what about Liz Shaw? Good shout. Here we have someone who never travelled in the TARDIS throughout her time with the Doctor, again at least not on screen, yet who is widely quoted as being the third Doctor's first companion. Jeff Waddell's response was, yes, or else we'd have a new companion every episode and every story. And they have to have been in multiple episodes and stories, apart from Sarah Kingdom obviously. So again, Jeff, are we counting out the Brigadier and Liz? Tornis Commander, and I hope I pronounced that right, said, that diminishes the role of people who worked with the Doctor but never travelled the time vortex with him. They may never have travelled time and space together because of the normal passage of time, and there's nothing unimportant about that. For example, consider Madame Vastra, Jenny and Strax, who never travelled in the TARDIS, but they spent some 80 years together while the Doctor lived in the clouds. Thanks for that thought. That then brings the Brig and Liz back into the companion fold. As for Vastra, Jenny and Strax, quite aside from Moffat's Mickey-taking of the Silurians and Sontarans, I personally would argue that they're only in the Doctor's life when he's in their time zone, and as such they're not really companions. Robert Curd commented, hooray, Lady Christina is out, but no one claims Liz Shaw isn't a companion. I'm also sticking with Yates and Benton, because things got complex and family-like in those times. I don't think Brent did, but Sarah certainly did, running down the ambiguity line that is. Lots of Cybermen did before Handles, as did the Keeper of Traken, and he who is known simply as the Human. Also, the Cowardly One in the episode where Brilliant Rita died to get a lift back home. Interesting thoughts, Robert, and thank you. Added to that list could also be the Master too, but I'm not sure that any fan would consider him to be a companion. Daniel Reamer said, I think a companion can mostly be defined as one whom the Doctor has invited into the TARDIS, or in some cases, someone whom he's accepted as a permanent or at least semi-permanent part of his life. Hedging your bets a little bit there, Daniel, but as I mentioned on the Facebook page, all views are valid, and yours is a great one. Now I also posted that statement on my own timeline, and here's what one of my friends said. Yes, because if not we would see Doctor Who TARDISing off to another place and time, and he'd have to come back and tell him or her about it, rather than them having shared it. It gives two perspectives first-hand, rather than one. Thanks for that. So, as with Andrew earlier, you're agreeing with the House. But then with that in mind, would you also include both Adam and Jackie as companions? Lastly, and you'll see why I've held this over till last shortly, we hear from Sandy Otis Doucette. And again, Sandy, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Sandy said this, I don't really agree with the statement. Vincent van Gogh travelled in the TARDIS and was featured in only one episode and made a small appearance in a second. If your statement means that people who only show up as helpers in episodes, like Craig, Stormageddon's dad, again 2 episodes in which he was heavily featured yet didn't travel in the TARDIS, but are not ongoing helpers through many episodes because they don't travel around regularly with the Doctor, then they don't qualify as companions, period. Thus, Van Gogh did travel in the TARDIS, and would be considered a companion, but didn't travel regularly with the Doctor. Do you see the dilemma? What makes Van Gogh worthy of being considered a companion over Craig? Then again, that means anyone who helps the Doctor throughout an episode could also be considered a companion. No matter how you brief their assistants, maybe, like Lorna, the girl who made the prayer leaf for Amy. Perhaps a further differentiation should be made than simply travelling in the TARDIS, like temporary companions or assistants if you prefer, as opposed to ongoing companions. And by the way, President Nixon travelled in the TARDIS in Day of the Moon, when the Doctor had to be released from NASA security after tampering with Apollo 11. But that hardly makes Nixon a companion. Some great thoughts there, Sandy, and I think you managed to successfully sum up the conclusion that I've been coming to throughout the week, that there can be no standard definition of a companion. We all have our respective thoughts and ideas, but ultimately we'll all differ in them, and that's the joy of fandom.
Oh, goodbye, my dear chap. I must say I've had the time of my lives.
And that's it for this week. Can I thank all of you who've contributed to this week's show? Yes, I know I was playing devil's advocate on the Facebook page, but your responses were brilliant and I'm very grateful. If having now listened to the show you have any further thoughts on how you define a Doctor Who companion, I'd love to hear from you, either on the Facebook page or at respectthething@hotmail.com. That's respectthething@hotmail.com. Next week, in the second of our controversy podcasts, we're looking at the UNIT dating controversy. Just when was the Doctor's time with UNIT? Thank you for listening to Theta Sigma's Doctor Who podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all copyright and property of the BBC, and no infringement is intended.